Hey there guys, Luke here with the Outdoor Gear Review. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today, this episode is after the camp for the Bushcraft Overnight Adventure. You guys might want to grab some coffee. We're going to discuss the trip, the gear, and everything else that came with it. Let's go ahead and get started. Now, as we discuss the overnight adventure, the Bushcraft Overnight Adventure, I'm actually in the process of uploading this video right now. Now, this video came in at 56 minutes long, about 17 gigs in size, because we do record at 1080p, so that means we're going to have a very large file size. And I tell you what, it really takes a long time to upload these files. I live in the mountains, so our internet speeds are not the best. It's not like a major city. As of right now, this video has been uploading for about 24 hours. It's actually just a little bit more than that. And it says we are now at 50%, and it says we have another 1,270 minutes until it's finished. So it's definitely taken some time. You know, when it comes to doing these adventures, it takes a lot of work. You're talking about like 12 hours of video and more that goes into making a 1-hour video. I tell you what, but I really do love it. I always have so much fun on these adventures. And with the Bushcraft Overnight Adventure, I had an absolute blast. The temperatures were perfect, not too cold, not too hot. That day it was about 25 degrees, and in the morning it was right around 19, 18, something like that. Just perfect get out, especially if you're moving around. You could stay nice and comfortable, and I definitely did. I was personally kind of hoping that it would snow that night, but it didn't happen. It actually snowed the next night. And actually, right now, we're getting ready for another snowstorm. I believe they're calling for 3 to 6 inches, with the higher elevations getting as much as a foot or more. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. I thought about trying to go out and camp in it, but it's a little bit too short of a notice. I mean, they've been calling for this little storm here for a week now, but only now are they saying that we're actually going to get some serious accumulation. Not that 3 to 6 inches is really serious, but for the winter, that's definitely more than we've had with any of the other storms. As we go on, I'm sure that we will be able to find a winter storm to go camping in. Because I tell you what, winter's my favorite time to get out, and just because it's cold doesn't mean you can't go camping. Now, with the Bushcraft Overnighter, going just straight up bushcraft was an absolute blast. Building that shelter, and it truly was an improvised shelter. We went up there to our favorite winter camping spot without any idea of what we were going to get ourselves into, and everything really came together all at one time. And like I said in the video, I had like 4 million ideas kind of just floating around. I was thinking, yeah, we can do a lean-to. You know, we could do some sort of A-frame shelter. All sorts of different debris shelters is what I was kind of leaning towards. But ultimately, we decided with the 3 combination shelter, we had the lean-to, debris on top, then the super shelter with the Mylar blankets. And I have to tell you guys that that shelter was so freaking hot. When I first got in it, I was super comfortable. I had just the right amount of wood on the fire. Now, as I slept for a couple hours, I woke up, put some more wood on the fire, went back to sleep, woke up again in an hour or two, and the last time that I was feeding the fire, I fed it. I mean, I just grabbed stuff, I was just throwing it, eyes closed, I was just chucking it in the fire. And I woke up maybe 20 minutes later, and I was actually concerned that my sleeping bag was going to melt. It was so freaking hot in there. And, you know, it's like I would put my hand on the plastic just to make sure that it wasn't going to melt. And it would be almost cool to the touch. But the amount of heat, that long radiation that was coming in, I tell you, it was definitely hot. Definitely the warmest winter shelter I've ever made. No doubt about it. Like I said in that video, I could have sealed that thing in a little bit better. I could have done a better job with the Mylar blankets. But when you're doing an improvised shelter, you do the best you can. That's true with life, right? So, now one thing I was thinking about, I put that entire shelter together with no cordage. It was all just gravity, the weight of everything kind of pushing down on everything to hold it all together. But I did use some cordage for the Mylar blankets, and I didn't have to do that. At the time, I was probably just getting tired and not thinking, so I just used cordage. But I could have used some thin sticks and just shoved them in the ground on the inside, put the Mylar blankets up, and just, you know, put the sticks at the top beam, and that would have held it in. I mean, there's countless ways you can do it. that's just another way. But yeah, overall, the shelter was great. It took a lot of work. That was a 3 to 4 hour shelter right there. And I got lucky. That's the truth right there. Just because it took me 3 to 4 hours doesn't mean that I can go back out into the woods and do it again in 3 to 4 hours. I was very blessed to have a lot of fallen trees, and some of those were super long. I was able to cut them into 3 sections, and they were still long enough for the slats on the back of that shelter. So, I mean, just because I did it in 3-4 hours doesn't mean that you could go out and recreate that shelter in 3 to 4 hours. Like I said, it doesn't mean that I can go back out there and recreate that. I mean, for a lean-to debris super shelter, that was the fastest I've ever put one together. And of course, I haven't actually put together a lean-to debris super shelter before. I mean, that was a first right there. Definitely done super shelters with tarps, done lean-tos before, and all that stuff. But now, when it comes to our gear, and the best bang for the buck, the tool that I used the most was definitely this fin saw. That's the 15-inch model, and that was a priceless piece of kit to use. Now, I could have used the axe to actually chop everything up, but that would have taken a whole lot more energy than it would have just to use that saw. And really, using that saw was kind of a multi-purpose thing. For one thing, I wasn't sure what shelter I was using. So whatever extra wood that I had, my plan was to use it for firewood. So having those nice clean edges makes it super simple to baton it, to chop it up with an axe. So, I mean, that's the reason why this fin saw was really the primary tool this trip. Now the Baco Laplander folding saw, 9-inch I believe, fantastic. I used it 2 or 3 times. It didn't get all that much use. You know, that's just how it goes sometimes. The Wetterling's axe did a fantastic job as well. Again, you guys know from my previous videos that I don't mind axes and hatchets, but the truth is they're very heavy. Yes, they do serve a very important purpose, but usually when I go out, very rarely do I have a need for an axe. Usually I could take my knife or whatever other tool that I'm happening to carry with me, and I could do just about the same thing, but with, you know, saving a lot of weight. And that small hunter's axe is not a lightweight axe whatsoever, even though it's fairly small. I mean, they do have models that are much bigger, and I'll actually show those off to you into the future there. Just for me personally, I'm not a huge axe fan. I hardly ever am in the situation where I actually need an axe over one of my other tools. And that's just me. I mean, some of you guys may love taking an axe out with you and swear by it. Man, that's freaking awesome. Good for you. Not quite my thing. Everybody's different, right? Now, when it comes to our pack, we were using the Eberly Stock G1 Little Brother. And if you guys don't know what that is, I'm sure you guys saw it in the video. And if you haven't watched that video, go watch that Overnight Adventure. You'll see that pack. I love Eberly Stock. The G1 Little Brother is technically a 3-day assault pack. But really, guys, that thing is huge. I've added the saddlebags onto the side of it. It has the endo frame in it. And it carries a heavy load, and it will carry a ton of gear very comfortably. I have always thought that the G1 Little Brother bag is more of a backpack than a 3-day assault pack. Typically, when you're talking about 3-day assault packs, they're more like 1-day assault packs. And that thing truly is a 3-day assault pack unlike any other pack out there. It definitely carried all the gear, and the majority of the space inside that pack was taken up by the Eberly Stock Reveille bag, the sleeping bag. 5 degrees, and it's not a small sleeping bag. Anytime that you're talking about sleeping bags and weight, if you say your sleeping bag weighs 4 pounds, you're talking about a large sleeping bag. And that's definitely the truth with the Reveille bag. It's not small, but it is a very high-performing sleeping bag, very true to its temperature rating, for me anyway. Now, I have a high metabolism, so I tend to stay warmer in cold weather than some people do, and everybody's different. Now, just because a sleeping bag says it's good for 15 degrees doesn't mean that it's good to 15 degrees for you or for me. It might be too hot for me, might be too cold for you, or vice versa. That's how it works. Everybody's body is different. So those temperature ratings are very average. That's just how it works. Definitely super comfortable in that sleeping bag. I tell you what, it was just an overall great night. I slept great, even though I had to wake up 3 or 4 times to feed the fire. I mean, there was just nothing to it. And luckily, I did get pretty dang lucky with all the firewood. After I chopped down the trees, and I got to the point where I just couldn't take any more chopping up, I just kind of scavenged around, find what type of big limbs that I could find, and started breaking those up and getting into a nice good pile. And so I'd build up the fire with the smaller stuff that I would find, and throw on the logs and stuff, and go straight to sleep. And had a terrific night. Now, the knife that we used, it has a long name, so let me make sure I get this right. It is the Boker Plus Armed Forces Fixed Blade Knife. And that was sent to me by one of my buddies who's stationed in Germany. Preston, you're the man. Thank you very much. And I have to say, it is a terrific blade. I mean, it really is terrific. Very sharp. It's heavy. It's big. I mean, it's really big. It's a big knife. It's not typically the type of knife that I would carry on my hip or in my pack for bushcraft. But for this trip, it fit the bill perfectly. And I have to say that it did a fantastic job of batoning. Now, I didn't get to try any big logs with it, but we'll do that in the future. There was one part where I was inside of the shelter and I was tying up the mylar blankets, and I was using that knife to cut some cordage. And I had taken the knife and I had just laid it down on top of the Tyvek. And the ground was sloped. So the knife slid, and I mean slowly, and it just pierced that Tyvek and cut a good hole in it. I mean, that is how sharp that knife is. I mean, it went through that Tyvek like it was just butter. Just cut a big old hole in it. And of course, I'm kind of like, oh my gosh, that knife is sharp. It really is. That SK5 carbon steel, very impressive. And you know, the price on that thing is actually fairly cheap. I was pretty surprised, really. You can pick that up on Amazon for $61.29. And if you're a Prime member, they can actually ship it to you for free in 2 days. So, pretty dang awesome right there. Definitely a good price. Now, if you're a big dude, you could probably get away with carrying a knife that large. Probably better than I can. It's just a little bit too long for my frame. So it's definitely one of those knives that I carry in my pack. And that's why I didn't put it on my hip. Going on to the meal, that was the rice and vegetables, dehydrated vegetables, with the metwurst, I believe it was, and we had some sort of cheese, which I didn't even end up eating. I cut the recipe in half. Basically, I had made those bags up. I made about 20 of them at a time. I realized a long time ago that that is just way too much food for one person to eat, especially when it comes to rice. Rice expands, and that really does make a ton of food. One of those bags really is like a 2-day meal or a 2-person meal. It was pretty darn tasty, especially after all of the work and calories that we had burnt just getting that shelter up. I'm sure we could have been eating a Pop-Tart and I probably would have been, oh my gosh, this is so good, but you know how that goes. When you're working hard and you get hungry, anything tastes great. But I like to think that my little special touches with that meal really took it to the edge there, made it that much better. Now, I did tell the story about the Through Night TN11S flashlight. And here is this little guy right here. And really, for a flashlight that produces so many lumens, 800 and something or other, it's not all that big. It really isn't. Now, it does have some extension tubes where you can put more batteries in this thing, but personally, I like this size right here. I can put this on my belt and wear this comfortably, and it's not going to yank my pants down. So, I mean, that thing's just super bright. Seizure mode, low, medium, high. And I tell you what, this thing really does function well. I still got a couple more tests to do on it before I do the review. But, I mean, so far, it's definitely a thumbs up. It's a great product. And it will cast a beam so far away. I mean, it's amazing, really. It really is. I tell you, I will go ahead and show you. This is a sneak peek right here of our next Through Night product that we're testing out. Let me go get it. So you guys have seen the Through Night T10 flashlight right here. Put on a lanyard. I love this little flashlight. It goes with me everywhere. And I did eventually take this off my keys because I found that having this around my neck on the lanyard works a whole lot better for my uses. Then you have the TN11S flashlight. which you guys just saw. And now we're moving on to the big boy. This is the TN32. And this is not a small flashlight. Maybe you guys can see that here. Beautiful case with it. It does come with a holster here that you can put on your hip. But I tell you what, this is a large, heavy flashlight. And I can't foresee myself carrying this on my hip, actually. It's too heavy, and it doesn't even have batteries in it right now. I actually haven't even tested this thing out yet, put them in there. But I'll go ahead and show this to you. Check this thing out. 1800 lumens will burn a hole in the atmosphere. So there are the three through night flashlights. And I tell you what, guys, Through Night is definitely becoming one of my favorite flashlight companies out there. Their products are fairly priced, and what you get is an incredibly good product. I can't begin to tell you guys how many times I have chucked these flashlights and dropped them and taken them out in some pretty tough conditions, and they just function so well. Like I said, still have to test out this TN11S flashlight a little bit more before we can get to the review. And of course, we're just about to go into the testing phase with this flashlight here. This is the TN32 model. I'm excited to test this one out just because it's such a monster. That was overall, like I said, a pretty interesting experience with the drunk individual in my yard. So, you know, if you guys follow me on Facebook, I actually mentioned that I had some sort of experience. And I can't say that I saved this guy's life. Who knows what on earth would have happened. He was drunk enough, and he was already, by the time I got out onto the porch, in the creek, soaking wet when it's about 5 degrees. Who knows? I think he might have made it down to the bridge down here behind my house, and I think if he would have fallen off of that, he would have died. Don't know, never will. That's life. Now, the piece of plastic that I used for my shelter was just a painter's tarp. They're super cheap. They're fairly lightweight. You can get them in different thicknesses. And I got that one off of Amazon. I don't know. It was fairly cheap, and I still have it. It's impossible, of course, to fold it back up the way it was. Just do your best that you can. The Mylar blankets, I got those years ago, and I got like 10 at a time for like $10 or something like that. So I kind of have them all over the house. I have a bunch in the cabinet. I've given some away for giveaways, and I've have them in the car just in case. Now, speaking of giveaways, the military surplus giveaway is coming up. So if you guys have not entered it yet, do it now, because it's almost over. I've actually ordered the goods. They're on their way. You guys have given so much to me. I want to give something back. So make sure to enter. There's a little bit of time left. You know how that goes with companies shipping military surplus. Sometimes you get them next day. Sometimes you get them in 2 weeks. So, yeah. Speaking of military surplus, our next overnight adventure will be a strictly military surplus overnighter. Now, I'm kind of on the fence there. How strict do I want to be with the term military surplus? Is it only stuff that's been produced for the government to use, or should we say gear that's used by the armed forces, by individuals in the Army, the Marines, and so on? How about you guys decide and let me know? Go ahead and drop me a line down below and tell me what you guys want to do. And so let me give you an example of what I'm talking about here. Now, so we can use the FILBE pack, which is an issued item, or we can use something like the Eberly Stock Terminator pack. That wasn't created for the government, but it is used by our men and women in the armed forces. So you see what I'm talking about there. There's a little bit of a technicality. So you guys decide. Should we say 100% military surplus, or can we allow for items that are still used by those men and women? You guys decide. Let me know. Now, before we end this video, there's one thing I've been wanting to talk about when it comes to bushcraft. And namely, it involves cordage. Now, there are, of course, you can use any type of cordage that you want to. In a lot of situations, you'll be lucky if you have cordage. But in that video, I did use some paracord. And I like paracord just fine, but it is definitely not my favorite cordage. I do like bank line better. But even over bank line, I happen to like fishing string. Now, I haven't seen many people say that they use fishing string for their bushcraft needs, but for me, it's one of my personal favorites. You can get a very high strength fishing string, and you can do everything you want to with it. And it's a whole lot lighter, and you can carry tons and tons of it. Now, like with paracord, I don't know if you guys are like me, but you know, you get 100 feet of it or whatever it is, and you cut it up, and it makes me feel bad. I don't know why. I don't know if you're the same way, but I don't like to cut up paracord. I don't like cutting up cordage if I don't have to. But when it comes to fishing string, it doesn't bother me one bit. I've always kind of been that way, and I've always liked using fishing string. It's very thin. Like I said before, you can get it at really strong strengths, and it's fairly cheap. You get tons of it. It doesn't take up any weight, and that's just me. I'd like to hear what you guys personally like to use, what you guys think about fishing string. Now, in the future, we will definitely make that happen. We'll do another bushcraft event, and we'll use just fishing string. We'll come up with some use for it if we have to use cordage. Now, just in case you're wondering about bank line, my favorite brand is the SGT number 36 bank line. Very strong, and you can carry a lot of it, and it's not super heavy, even though I do like fishing line better. Now, when it comes to clothing, as you guys saw in the video, I have my Fjallraven trousers on, and they are definitely the workhorse of the clothing. Just being able to go through the brush, doesn't matter what you hit, what you get snagged on. These pants don't tear because they are just hardcore trekking pants. They are made for bushcraft. They're made for alpine ascents. I mean, they're just tough as nails. Super, they are fairly expensive. I'm not going to say they're super expensive, but they're pretty dang expensive. But they are so well worth the price. If you've never heard of Fjallraven trousers before, look them up. The G1000 material is just freaking phenomenal. And, you know, as you guys know, this is the one pair of pants that I've been wearing, and I have 4 pairs of these. And I've been wearing these for over a year now. The only ones. And, I mean, they just look fabulous. They look brand new. Look like I haven't even used them. Definitely just super tough. Very, very nice. And when you're out in the backcountry, you're doing your bushcraft, your thing, you got to make sure that you're wearing the right clothing for the situation. If you're going to be hiking on a trail is one thing, and you can get away with nylon this or, you know, whatever type of rain gear that you're wearing, or shell, I should say. But if you're doing bushcraft, if you're sitting around a fire, if you're having to really work and cut things up, you want to definitely make sure that you're wearing clothing that can handle some abuse, and that's not going to rip a big hole in it or melt if an ember falls on it. So that's pretty much why I selected the clothing that I did. Fjallraven pants, I had one of these shirts on, and actually in the same long sleeve right here, and that's just to wick away moisture. It's not really an insulating layer, and because I wasn't really worried about the insulating part. I did have a Mammut fleece pullover, and I had another sweater jacket over top of it, but I can't think of the name right off. And if you're interested, let me know, and I'll put that in the description for you. All those items, I wouldn't have to worry about an ember falling on them and melting a hole in it. Just definitely tough, and that's where I pretty much chose all the gear, all the clothing that I did. So, before we go, we might as well look and check out the progress here on this video. See how far along we are now. We are now at 54%. 1,150 minutes to go. So, guys, I want to say thank you so much for watching the Bushcraft Overnight Adventure. I want to say thank you all so much for subscribing. We're about to hit our 7,000 mark right now. Just absolutely amazing. And I appreciate, guys, all the commentary back and forth. Our Facebook subscribers, or likes, or whatever they call each other. You know, I appreciate you guys liking it, having the good conversation, and all the messages and stuff. It's awesome. So, guys, make sure to take care. Be well. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff, and I'll see you guys around. Until the next time. Everybody, take care.